Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 185 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the works of writer, director, producer J.J. Abrams and his Bad Robot universe. I'm Matt Crandall, here with my co-host Marcelo Inostroza, as we come to the end of season 1 of Duster, the series finale entitled 66 Reno Split Decision, which was not intended to be the series finale of Duster, but as we have found out in the last couple of days, it ended up being because Max, HBO Max, through all of the changes and moving on, the show didn't really catch on with mainstream audiences, even though it actually has found a pretty passionate fan base. And if you look at the critical score, the critics who did watch it really liked it. So it's one of those really kind of kicking the nuts, because 90% of this actually does function perfectly fine as a series finale. But there is that 10% that sets up what could have been, and it is going to probably drive people crazy if they do discover this show later. And it's too bad that HBO didn't have the money or the faith in the show to really put their muscle behind it. But here we are, the finale that had a lot of work to do from where we left going into it. The finale I had heard was co-written by J.J. Abrams. It was not. It was just Latoya Morgan. So she got to step up and take the reins here at the end. And I actually think she did a really good job, because this episode opens with the backstory of Nina and her father and Saxton. So we figure out what actually happened back in the day that set this whole revenge plot into motion for Nina. Marcelo, how did you feel that opening segment played? Did it give you enough? Did it feel like too much? How are you feeling when we find out, that her father was one of Saxton's, basically people place bets through him, but he got onto the wrong page of the ledger with Saxton, and that's why he was taken out.
I love the opening to the final episode of Duster Ever, because it really does a good job at showing us the moment that Nina's life changed forever, and it does show us that Nina's dad, despite him being involved with Saxon and some dirty dealings here and there, he did stand up to Saxon, and he did try and fight with him. So that really showed me, that really gave me more evidence that Saxon did indeed kill Nina's father, because Nina's father didn't cooperate with him by running his illegal games through Nina's father's store. But this episode did actually reveal something else about Nina's father that told me that, listen, Saxon is a bad guy, and he had no right to do what he did to Nina's father. But when when we do find out what happens to him, I was like, you know what, Saxon's in the right, because because that guy fucked up Saxon's business processes. He fucked up his whole network.
He did, and it is revealed that he was a rat. He was an
Yeah,
informant,
yeah, he's a rat.
and that was the main reason that he was taken out, because
Right,
he had flipped on Saxton and was informing to the feds. Um,
right, right, right.
which lines up with, his daughter ends up becoming an FBI agent. Like, it makes sense, but
Yeah.
it is ironic that it is the company she's now working for basically is the reason that her father was taken out, which also echoes what we've kind of been hearing about Joey as we've been going through these episodes.
Yeah.
So I
No.
thought that was handled fairly well, and then of course that is presented in a flashback, sort of like a dream almost. And then Nina wakes up and she's tied to a chair because, you know, she did get found out, her cover was blown, and she's being waterboarded to get more information, and it's a pretty brutal scene. Um, and we know, there's no way. I'm never actually worried that Nina's gonna die because I'm like, even if they knew it was gonna be the last episode, which they didn't, I didn't believe that one of their leads was gonna get taken off the board by the end of this episode. Um, but it works pretty well because we just hate. I always just call him Cheddar Bob because of 8 Mile, but I hate Cheddar Bob and him torturing her to get more info to try and find out like how she turned Jim and what's going on. uh, was interesting, and we really worry for Nina's safety in those moments because we don't want her to be like disfigured or anything weird. Um, and we're waiting for Jim to show up and hopefully save the day.
Yeah, that whole sequence with Nina being waterboarded by Cheddar Bob in the chair was great. But listen, I didn't want anything bad to happen to Nina either. But considering the rep that Cheddar Bob has throughout the whole series, I thought he would have. I thought he would. I thought he should have fucked her up even more. Like like it would have been. I mean, this is a little bit too violent for a Bad Robot show, but it would have been cool if he would have like broken her leg or something like that.
That would have been pretty extreme. Um, but yeah, I could see something like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No. Yeah. No. I know. I like if he would have like if Cheddar Bob would have broken her leg, and then if Sax would have come, if uh if Sax would have shown up after that and then like reprimanded him for doing that and then tried to talk to her, I think that her performance would have been a lot more emotionally resonant. No, actually, that's the wrong word. Her performance would have been much more heightened than it was with her being tied to the chair and the conversation that she has with Saxon in a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, that conversation was great, but I think by her having the broken leg, her performance could have been heightened by that. That's the only reason why I would have had Cheddar Bob break her leg.
Yeah, it definitely would have changed the
I
way
don't know.
that things went down. I think. Um,
Yeah, I don't know.
but from there, basically, we go in. Of course, Jim finds out that Nina and his cover is blown, and that stuff is going the wrong way because he's dropping off Luna, and he's at Izzy's house, and her boyfriend says, "Oh yeah, this dude Grooms woke up and he was screaming for Saxton." And Jim's like, "Oh shit!" And that's when he like realizes like stuff has gone bad because if Grooms has been screaming for Billy to come visit him or whatever, then like it's over. They're going to be outed. And so from there, he has to basically come up with some sort of contingency plan to make sure that Nina doesn't just get murdered and he doesn't just get murdered because obviously Sax is going to be pretty pissed that Jim, one of his closest, allies, has been flipped. And so he enlists the help of his dad, who, you know, has been a great character on this series. And they they do this basically Reno split, um, which as Jim goes to confront, Saxton and where Nina is being held, his dad goes to the bar where Genesis works, with a gun. So of course, when Jim shows up and they're like, "You aren't getting out of this, you son of a bitch! Like, how could you betray us this way?" And he's trying to kind of reason it out. And Saxon's like, "You aren't walking out of here." And he's like, "Well, actually, you might want to give your daughter a call because if I don't walk out of here, then your daughter's going down." How did you feel about this plan? And especially like we really do see Jim's dad being nice and having like a great convo with Genesis, um, up until right before like the call comes in that really changes the mood and the vibes in the place.
I love the fact that as Jim goes to go and try and save Nina, he actually hedges his bets, and he actually goes to tell his father, "Hey, I need you to hang out with Genesis, and if I don't come back by this time, I need you to take her out as an insurance." I love that idea because he's covering his bases. He's making sure that if he doesn't get out of it, Saxton will suffer. It's a great way to sort of back the villain in the corner and give him the incentive to cooperate, even if he doesn't want to. So that was a brilliant choice by Jin to do that. Also, the scenes between the scenes that we see in this episode between Jim's dad and Genesis at the bar are wonderful, and I really think I listen. I don't know how you feel, but I think Jim's dad is like the unsung hero of this whole series. When he was on screen, he was so delightful, and he's such a good actor, and he just seemed like a really, really kind of fucked up nice dude. And
He did.
uh,
He did. He
yeah,
did.
yeah,
I was just say I think Wade Ellis in this show is one of the cool characters that I'm gonna miss.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and you know what? All the furthermore, all the conversations that Wade Ellis is having with Genesis in the bar is just reminiscing on good times. There's this moment where Genesis um, shows Wade like a business plan that she typed up to like. There's this point where Genesis shows Wade this business plan that she typed up to present to her father later. So the second that she does that, I'm like, oh, this is not a good idea because I bet you that Sax isn't going to be allowed to read this business plan. So I don't know. I just found all the stuff with them in the bar really really delightful.
Yeah, I liked the stuff in the bar, and like throughout the episode, there's a lot of talk about well, when it comes to Nina, like fathers and daughters, and when it comes to Saxton, like fathers and sons, and Jim and Wade, fathers and sons, and like what your parents owe you as their child, and vice versa, and a lot of that stuff comes through really, really well in the dialogue, and it works so that later, when a key decision is made, because it is kind of revealed that Jim does have a daughter and that like the reason he was doing all of this stuff against Saxton is to protect his family that Saxton didn't know about. It makes the choice that comes after that work better because all the dialogue leading up to that has really shown, you know, what this fraught relationship can be between, you know, children and parents, and the burden of kind of generational trauma and all that stuff, which is kind of like overdone nowadays, but it actually worked really well in the context of the episode. So I did like that, you know, we cut to that talk with Wade and Genesis, and they're talking stuff, and as Jim, is finding himself chained to a pipe because Sax can't believe that he would do this, and he does reveal to him like, "Look, I know you killed Joey. I made calls. Paris Guilford's dynamite was like the only thing that could have done it, and I can't allow that to happen." And of course, then Sax with this whole, you gotta, if my dad doesn't hear from me, he's gonna kill your daughter thing. But also, then Saxton is like, "Well, I gotta turn you over to Greek Sal because they have the tape," which is what we find out. So we find out that, Howard Hughes calls and he's like, "The fucking guys fucked it up and they got whatever." And you're like, "Oh shit." Greek Sal's guys got the Nixon tape. Nobody has really checked out what's on the tape, so they don't even know what they have. Um, and so the big central drama that leads to like the big action set piece of this episode is that they are going to turn Jim over to get the tape, um, and then basically figure out what to do from there, right? And as Jim is being turned over, right after he has revealed to Saxton that like Luna is his daughter, and that's why he was doing this, and like he thought that Sax crossed him and killed his brother. Um, Saxton, does the right thing, and he, instead of letting them just take Jim, starts shooting, and like then everybody starts shooting, and shit goes crazy. And our favorite dirtbag Billy Cheddar Bob catches one in the eye, and I was like, hell yeah, motherfucker! Piss on his grave. See you later. So glad that you're gone. Um, and more shooting, and like the goons get taken out. But there is, of course, a pivotal moment where bullets go flying, and with people in the crosshair, Saxton takes the bullet, and he's a hero in death. I put that in air quotes because this show was really ambiguous about what actually happened here, and I have to believe that this was the season 2 leaving the window open, because when Saxton is shot, Royce runs over and he's like, "What do we do? What do we do?" And they're like, "Sorry, man, he's gone." Like, and in those moments, I'm like, "Oh, Saxton has died. He's dead. Great." But then when Jim shows up to wave his dad off of killing Genesis, uh, he's like, "Oh, I got to tell you something. Your brother is with your dad at the hospital." And I'm like, "The hospital? Motherfucker was pronounced dead, I thought, in the last scene." And then we kind of leave that open. We actually do not revisit whether he lived or died in the episode, because it's all very vague. Nina talks about how, like, she got her revenge and got what she came for, but did she? Because we don't know if Saxton is alive or dead. How did you read that after, like, when Royce is crying over his father's body and like, what do we do? And they're just like, there's nothing we can do. Sorry, kid. And then in the next scene, they're like, well, he's at the hospital. Did you feel that was Jim trying to soften the blow for Genesis so that she would find out her dad was dead from a family member? Or was it them leaving the door ajar in case they wanted to bring Saxton back for a season 2?
That scene for me, like it was for you, was very, very confusing because when Jim comes in to call off Wade from punching Genesis's ticket, the way that he reacts is very, very odd, right? So I'm thinking that I'm thinking indeed they left the door open for Sax to come back in season 2, or it was Jim just being too much into the moment and sort of protecting Genesis as much as he could before they got to the hospital. Because I do think when certain people pass away in your lives, I do think it does matter who you hear it from first.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you hear it from the wrong person, sometimes a blow can hit you a lot harder than if you hear it from the right person,
Yeah.
or or the or the person that you need to in the moment. But let me be clear, guys. When Saxton sacrificed himself for Royce, and you have this beautiful shot from above with Royce covering Saxton's wound on the stomach, I thought the guy was dead. And and there's this great moment when Nina tries to tries to you know help Royce to his feet. It's a great shot with like Nina just looking towards Sax. I mean, it's a great, really tiny shot. But I thought Sax was dead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I
and I did too. Like, I thought in that scene we had settled that he had died.
right.
But then the aftermath after that, even when Nina is kind of like wrapping things up at the office, it doesn't quite feel like he's dead. So I think it was ambiguous on purpose. But now that we know there isn't anymore, we can just be like, oh, it was to soften the blow, um,
Right.
because like
Can I,
there's no reason for him to have survived this, especially if now that it's a one-off.
what do you think? What's your opinion on Saxton being involved with every like? What do you think? What's your opinion on Saxon being revealed to be involved with every shady organization in the show? Because there's this moment in the warehouse. Well, I mean, I mean, you hinted to it a little earlier when Sax talks to Howard Hughes, and Howard Hughes says, "You got to find this tape. If you don't find the tape, our deal goes to shit, and then you're basically on your own." But what do you think about Sax being involved with every major player in this grand conspiracy for this first and only season of Duster? Because I thought that was a little crazy, dude. Like, like you and
It
I,
it
like
is, but like they wanted to sell him as like super crime boss, and if
right,
he's got his hand in every pie, it
right,
kind of makes sense. And
hmm
with information we get in the final scene,
yeah,
then it also kind of makes sense that Saxton would be tied into some of this stuff because of who is like at the top of this weird shit. Um,
right,
we'll save that for like when we actually get to that final moment. But the
sure,
other like key important thing, so obviously the big action scene is that shootout. Everybody gets kind of a moment. Even Awan shows up and like gets a small moment. So like I was glad to see him, but that felt like another character that watching the whole series I liked so much, and it felt like in the last few episodes he really got sidelined and kind of shortchanged,
yeah,
um, which is too bad. Same with for the most part, Grunberg also did. He got like a good scene in this episode,
yeah.
but
At the very end,
but it was like okay. I feel in these last few episodes, like he was a guy who I wish there was a way we could have brought him into the action.
that would have
But
been
again,
cool.
it feels like that was something that maybe would have happened next season, right? Like this was a character who was supposed to be intimidating, and we weren't sure if we could trust him or not. And then by the end of this season, we realized we can trust him, and then he would probably be out doing stuff with Nina next year, um, which again is just another what if too bad kind of thing. We
Yeah.
do
Oh,
we.
sorry.
I was gonna say the other like important thing that ties off one of our storylines that has been ongoing is that earlier I didn't mention that Jim gives Izzy the photos of the union boss in bed with a hooker that Jim took in episode 1 of the series. So we went on that mission where Jim took the pictures and got the blackmail in case they needed it, and he turns it over to Izzy so she can actually use it rather than Saxton having to blackmail this guy, which is why the photos were taken in the first place. And she does use that to get the leverage over him to get all the union concessions for women in the trucking industry. And we put that storyline to bed because she uses the blackmail and she's like, "Oh, I don't think this is your wife." And he's like, And so I did like seeing that asshole get blackmailed was pretty satisfying. And that tees up that when Jim, after all of this shootout business, he goes to visit Izzy again. And she's having a party to celebrate because she used the blackmail material and they got everything they wanted in the Union battle, right? So they're having a party. And this scene, knowing that there is not going to be a second season, absolutely drove me fucking insane. And I actually, even if there wasn't, even if there was going to be a second season, I absolutely hated this. So he goes and he's talking to her and he's like, "I'm going to jump town for a while. Like, I got to get out of here. Shit got too crazy. I can't just hang around." And she's like, "No, you got to stay. Like, I'm going to need you. And Izzy and Luna's going to need you. Like, you have to stay." And he's like, "Stuff's getting too hot." And she's like, "Well, my boyfriend, David, the oncologist, he's not David the oncologist. He's David my oncologist." And Jim, of course, is taken back. And the audience is fucking taken aback. And she's like, "Yeah, I got cancer and I'm going to have a big cancer battle." And I'm like, what the absolute fuck were they thinking in this moment? Because this is the last thing we needed for this character. And mercifully, there isn't going to be a second season where we have to watch her get sick and battle cancer while she's also trying to like settle all this trucker stuff that she's stood up for. How did you feel in this moment where like there's two twists in the finale? This was the first one and I absolutely hated it. And the second one I loved, but now that we don't have a season 2 is also like bang your head against a wall twist. But how did you feel of this first one knowing that like Izzy is sick and is expecting Jim to stick around because she's got a cancer battle coming up.
I absolutely fucking hated the twist of Izzy having cancer because it feels like it was something that was tacked on to the character because Latoya Morgan or J.J. Abrams didn't necessarily feel that she was interesting enough. Like, like, like going into this episode, we already knew that the show wasn't going to come back. So if they would have ended the show with Jim watching Luna and Izzy party over their party and celebrate over their victory over the a trucking company because of the blackmail that Jim shot earlier in the season. If the show would have ended with a conversation between Jim and Luna, where Jim walks away, gets in his car, and drives off, the show could have ended right there. Right there, it would have been perfect. For forget the cancer stuff and forget the amazing stuff that comes later, right? Like I'm with you. Like I want a season 2 of Duster, but I'm so happy that we're not going to get one now because if we would have got one, we would have to deal with this Luna story plot, and she would have probably died anyway. There's no way in hell that she could have come back from a serious cancer diagnosis like that in the 70s. Now maybe with all the advancements, but in the 70s, forget it.
It was just so tonally out of place with the way that the show has operated because
Yeah.
even when we have a character who had a full fucking heart transplant, like we still were making jokes at his expense because of his mood swings because of the medicine and him fighting a gorilla and all this shit to get the scars. So like the fact that we were going to have to hunker down for like a very serious cancer storyline just felt like too much and the wrong sauce in this recipe. So like I'm glad that we don't have to see any of that because when they did that moment, I like if I was drinking a pop at the time, I would have done a spit take because I was like, you can't be serious. This is the last thing on earth this show would have needed to have like a fun freewheeling second season that I hope we were setting up. Um, I think that in that moment, to get Jim to stay, there should have been something where she's like, David and me are taking our relationship to the next level, but you have proven yourself more reliable than you have been in the past. And if you stay, then I think we should tell Luna the truth. And, you can be part of her life as her actual father. And then that would have gotten Jim to stay even with the danger. And that would have put a bow, especially now that it's the final episode, that would have put a bow on that storyline that would have worked. Um, Now, you know, people might be like, man, this guy doesn't like anything. I do have to say that for the most part, I thought this was like an awesome finale and
It
like
was a great
really did
finale.
tie up a lot of the storylines that we had been dealing with. It's just that that one particular scene is my like least favorite scene of the entire series, and it happens to come in the final 10 minutes of like what otherwise is a finale that does land the plane thematically, at least on like 90% of the stories that they had set up, and moved quick with action, had likable characters, give us good dialogue. It did everything that the show did well at like its highest level. So I thought for the most part super entertaining. And then we move to Nina being like, "Well, I'm done here. I basically finished what I wanted to do," and Grunberg being like, "You ain't even started what you were meant to do. There's more stuff that you don't know about, and I'm going to tell you some stuff that I've been keeping from you." And of course, I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me. This guy knew more stuff all along, and he didn't tell us." How did you feel when Nina is basically about to say her goodbyes, and Grunberg's like, "Not so fast. I got a bombshell I got to drop on you."
I felt so enraged when Grunberg said that to Nina as a way to potentially keep her in the office and in Phoenix, helping them, get the guy at the top that we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes. Why do I feel so enraged? Because I postulated at the beginning of the series that Grunberg was doing his own personal investigation into Saxton and into this bigger crime conspiracy that's going throughout the show. But because Grunberg wasn't because Greg was hardly in the show, that was never really, really, really paid off in a satisfying way. So when he says not only not only was I doing an investigation to what was happening in my own office, but I can tell you some shit that you don't know. I'm like, dude, this would have come in handy if you would have been more fucking a part of the show. Like he could have been in league with Nina and A1 throughout the whole fucking thing, but because Grunberg didn't have that big of a presence in the show, I don't know why, it didn't happen. So I was enraged. I was enraged. So 2 seasons in a row in the last 10 minutes, I was enraged for the finale. Look, it was great, but those two beats really pissed me off.
And again, the Grunberg one I feel like was teeing up more
Season two,
involvement
right?
in the second
Yep.
season if they had found a way to get this show seen by people.
Yeah.
And then our final scene is Nina and Jim meeting up, and I'm of two minds because like everything that happens in this scene is great, but this was like one of the most, I don't know, green screen something scenes where like they're standing on the edge of this canyon, and like every shot, reverse shot, where we see like this sunset that's happening felt so fake that it just kept reminding me of uh anybody who has checked out my other channel, Armchair Directors, we talked about um Furiosa, and the best scene of the movie is almost ruined because it's just green screen background, and like, and you're like, why did they not reshoot this like anywhere but here, because it's such a powerful scene, but it's undercut by the visuals just looking like absolute CGI crap. And so Jim and Nina sitting on top of the car on this cliffside, but then the reverse shot of Jim where we're seeing all these clouds is like the worst compositing I've seen in like a long time. And I'm like, oh my God. But so what happens in this scene is the big mind-blowing explosion of the episode where Nina says, look, I got to tell you, the guy who was pulling all the strings all this time in this conspiracy shit, the CIA, the FBI, Xavier, who we have not been able to track down, who like whatever his name, that agent who went nuts was warning us about Xavier on the tape, and how Xavier is the one behind all of this weird stuff and all the shady dealings. Well, I got news for you, Jim. Xavier is your brother Joey, and he's not dead. And Jim's like, what? Say what? And she's like, yeah, so like we gotta go and we gotta find Joey because he's the guy who has been behind all of this conspiracy stuff, and like we need to get to the bottom of this. How are you feeling finding out the two things? The whole premise of the show was Jim teamed up with Nina to get revenge for his brother's death, which we find out his brother's not even dead. And then the big bad that actually has been playing all sides and pulling all the strings, being his brother, was like a jaw-dropping moment that I was like, wow, if this was setting up a season two would have been cool as hell. So it really, but it bittersweet again, because we knew that Duster wasn't going to get renewed, and within a week of this episode airing, they made that official. So how did you feel when you found out Xavier is Joey Ellis?
I absolutely loved it, but I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken because I knew, like Matt just said, we weren't going to get a season two. And the other thing that Nina does mention in this horrible CGI scene with them by a cliff, I completely agree with you. The CGI was just awful on both sides. I just couldn't. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't look at it. It was so bad. Um, but I think that the one thing that Latoya Morgan and JJ did so well in the series is they went against expectations for what a show like this promised to deliver to his audience. Everything that they set up on the surface looked like your standard 70s crime thriller investigation show. But as we kept digging, everything had another layer to it, another layer to it, another layer to it. And then you would dig underneath all this crap, all this interesting story plots, and underneath that it will be this whole other interesting thing. So the whole show was a giant mystery box of things that worked and things that didn't work. But this final reveal of Xavier being Jim's dead brother was absolutely fascinating to me, and I would have loved to see how Jim's father, Jim's father reacted to this. Like that would have been so great, and I do feel that the show should have ended there. The fact that they tacked on one more scene really made me angry because this whole tape thing with Nixon and that bullshit. I'm like, I'm done. Just end the scene right there. Just end the scene on the bad CGI mountain with Nina and Jim. Like,
Right. Well, they basically, you had said before, like, we haven't seen Mad Raoul
right, I did.
actually go like full Mad Raoul because we've only seen his cronies and his henchmen. And so we do see at that shootout, like the tape that was supposed to be in the possession of Greek Sal getting turned over, gets gets lost in the shootout, and we see that Mad Raoul's cronies have the tape. And unlike Greek Sal's crew, they decide to listen to it. And as soon as they put it on, they're like, is this motherfucking Richard Nixon? They're like, oh my God, wait till Mad Raoul gets a load of this. And so we were going to continue the Nixon tape storyline into the second season, which is something I was ready to be done with. I know there are probably a big contingent who loves that aspect of the show, so it makes sense why they left that scene in. But yeah, with if you I'm gonna tell people, like, going forward, if they watch Duster, to basically turn it off after that reveal of the Joey as Xavier, and then just like wonder what that could have been. But because all these scenes are setting up a season of TV that will never happen, it is a little frustrating when you're like on the third teeing up a season that won't happen button, right? It's like, two things teed up is even too many if we're rewatching this when we know it's not going to happen.
Yeah, look. For my money, when I rewatch Duster again, because I will rewatch it because I'm a bad robot fanatic and I'm a JJ fanatic, I'm gonna watch it again. But when I rewatch the show again, I'm just gonna end this episode with that shot of Jim looking at Izzy and um Luna celebrating after their big victory uh, um, against the trucking company. I'm not even going to go into the final moments of this episode because, as amazing as they were, like Matt said, they promised something that we will never see.
Right, especially because, yeah, because you are right, that is probably where to stop it, because the fact that Jim's brother is Xavier actually does not matter to the story that we have seen so far. It would
Nope.
only matter to a story going forward, and it pulls the rug out from under us for assuming that Joey was dead. Um, but if you were to rewatch it and just stop it, never getting that reveal, it probably works much better because 90% of the storylines have been settled at that point, and you can just enjoy what we got, knowing that Ezra Saxton died to save his son, but also basically got what he deserved for all the people he had killed throughout the years. And hotshot new rookie FBI agent made good, and Jim can enjoy his life and, keep riding his duster into the sunset if he needs to. Um, so I think now that we have come to the end of this series, if you were going to grade the series as a whole, not not dwelling on the fact that those final scenes tee up a season of TV we'll never get, out of 10, how are you scoring Duster overall?
I would give Duster wow. Um bef- before before all the stuff with Howard Hughes and the government and the conspiracy, I would have gone pretty high on Duster, but because of the crazy machinations of how complicated the story got after Howard Hughes got introduced, that took the score of the show down for me. So out of 10, I'll give it a 7. It was really, really enjoyable. I just thought that it had too much crazy wackadoo story with the Howard Hughes angle and everything.
Yeah, I'm landing on a 7 as well. And I think if people ask me like, should I watch this? I will say, yeah, you should. You definitely, it's worth the 8-hour investment. Um, but my favorite, and I've said it as we've been doing this, my favorite mode of the show was basically what that second episode was, where Jim goes to do some sort of crime heist kind of thing of the week. It can be a little wacky where we are playing with history and real people and the timeline or whatever. But also, I really just dug like Jim meeting and us meeting more like of the crazy underworld of this small community that Saxton runs. So like, Patrick Warburton as the dude with the sunglasses who's obsessed with Elvis and is so quirky and all that stuff. Like I want that show of like every week Jim has to do some cool crime because some weirdo freak has got leverage over him. More so than the Richard Nixon tapes are being passed around because of this conspiracy and one FBI agent got too close so we had to drug and kill him and now somebody else is onto the scent of the twisted machinations to make sure that Washington stays safe despite being crooked as hell, right? So like I understand the impulse to do that, and that probably was a big selling point in the pitching of the show because let's face it, in the world we're living in now, like conspiracies, so many of the people in the population are convinced that conspiracies are real, that like that is a way to hook people. um but it just wasn't my favorite mode of the show. So as we moved into the last couple of episodes and it became more about the Howard Hughes FBI Nixon tape stuff, it dinged it a bit. But I do think a 7 out of 10 is a pretty strong score. And again, I really did like how Latoya Morgan landed the plane. But those first 3 episodes were Latoya and JJ writing together, and they felt like some of the strongest ones because I do think she has a great voice, and when she's writing Nina, obviously, JJ doesn't have the perspective to write an authentic black woman in the 70s, right? But Latoya seems to have a great authorial voice over a character like that. But we still had the JJ isms in there, and obviously a lot of Josh Holloway's dialogue, especially early on, to the show's benefit and detriment, was James Ford Sawyer dialogue, right? So I'm like, but I fucking love this. That's the shit that works. When we let this guy just crank the mojo to 10 and do his thing is when I'm having the most fun. So I felt like we kept dialing Jim's personality down when the other writers took over. And I think that that was probably because they were conscious of we can't just have this guy be Sawyer. And JJ, I don't think would have thought about it too much because Sawyer was a character that he wrote for and helped create, right? So he wouldn't look at this guy sounding similar to Sawyer as a negative, but people who grew up watching Lost and then working on this show may have a different opinion where they dialed some of that down on Josh Holloway just a little bit. That, I am happy, as people have pointed out and we have pointed out ourselves, this is the first thing since the rise of Skywalker that JJ has actually been fairly hands-on. Now, he might have only been hands-on the first 3 episodes and then did what he always does, walked out the door and began working on something else. But I really did feel those fingerprints, and I'm just happy that he still had it. He was getting his groove back. And even if this show, because it is going to be a 1-season wonder, might get lost to time, I do think it's going to have a bigger footprint than Undercovers or Alcatraz, because now in the streaming age, this is built for streaming because, those first few episodes get you hooked and they're very light and they are mission of the week. And then by the time you're just rolling and hitting next episode, it's when it starts dropping those cliffhangers. And I think that as long as it stays on this service, it will actually find like a decent audience over time, but it didn't light a fire to grab that audience right away.
I do think that you're definitely onto something there. This show to me had JJ's fingerprints all over it, even though, like you said, he was only probably directly involved with the first 3 episodes that he co-wrote with Latoya. This show felt like a bad robot joint this show felt like a proper bad robot joint from beginning to end. And that was just absolutely delightful to me. To your point of this show being discoverable later on, I definitely think that's possible, even if the show gets eventually taken off of HBO streaming service. If this show goes to a place like, God forgive me, but Tubi, I think on a platform like that, this show would have a greater opportunity to even get to a bigger audience that didn't get a chance to see it in its first run. So I definitely think in the age of streaming and on-demand TV, if that's even a word that everybody still uses, which is probably is not, they just use streaming now. This show does have a future in rerun, and I do think that it's going to get rediscovered by people years down the road, and people are going to learn to appreciate it much more after it got canceled. Sadly,
Yeah, it's going to be one of those shows that people are like, wow, I can't believe this only got 1 season. What happened? And it's going to
yeah.
be like, well, they just didn't market it and nobody knew it existed. And later it's just going to be a fun 8-hour watch. So that is Duster, the first new J.J. Abrams written Bad Robot show in a long time. As we're moving forward here, we're going to talk about the other most recent Bad Robot show, not written by J.J. Abrams, but produced, which is David E. Kelly's Presumed Innocent, starring Jake Gyllenhaal on Apple TV. So we're going to be talking about that show going forward. And spoiler alert, Presumed Innocent just got nominated for 4 Emmys as this episode is coming out. So we aren't going to talk about that in our coverage because we did record it already. But just so you know, if you're like, should I check this show out? Hell yeah. Because all of the great actors on that, Ruth Negga, Bill Camp, Peter Skarsgård, and Jake Gyllenhaal, are all nominated for Emmys for their work on Presumed Innocent. Now, the show itself didn't garner any like larger awards consideration, but the thing that made that show special, if you tune into our coverage of it, is just the fact that the cast really goes for it, and having Sarsgaard and Gyllenhaal, real life brother-in-laws, go toe to toe with each other, and Ruth Negga, the wife who you can't quite trust and get your finger on, all those performances are worthy of an Emmy. And I did love that Bill Camp got nominated in there as the guy who once fucked an Ottoman. So if you want to learn more about that, make sure you tune into our coverage of Presumed Innocent Season 1 starting next week, because that's what we're talking about. And, thanks for checking us out here. If you are new to the show and just joined us for our Duster coverage, we do have lots of back episodes where we talk about the big breakthrough Bad Robot TV shows: Felicity, Alias, the biggest Bad Robot show, Lost. We also do talk about the movies that J.J. Abrams himself has written or directed. So if you want to check out what we thought of Forever Young or Regarding Henry, you can go back and check that out. If you are a glutton for punishment and you want to know about what we thought of 11/22/63, the Bad Robot JFK conspiracy miniseries from a few years ago, we also got that there for you. So if you are listening and liking and enjoying the show, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Like, follow, subscribe anywhere you get podcasts. We are on YouTube. We have some video episodes, all these Duster ones. You can check out a video. Other episodes are just audio only, but they are on YouTube, which makes it easier. Please comment. Let us know what you want us to cover, what you enjoy about the shows. We would be psyched to hear from you. If you want to get in touch with me, I am on Letterboxd, logging movies, letterboxd.com/MDC3000, MDC3000. So we can talk movies. You can yell at me for what I rated Superman, or you can ask me questions about seeing Boogie Nights in 70 millimeter on the big screen last weekend as I logged that on Letterboxd. Marcelo, you are also still going hardcore on the social media. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, guys, if you want to reach out to me to talk about Radio 105 and to tell me how much you love our work we do, because I do love the show, but it is nice to hear from our audience once in a while. But if you want to talk to me, you can reach me on X. I'm at QuickFanatic88, or you can also log some movies with me on Letterbox and watch out what horrible shark movies I'm watching that particular week. My Letterbox is the same as my X. It's at QuickFanatic88, so that's how you can reach me.
All right, that'll do it for Duster. We have dusted it off and we have put it to bed. So for now, Radio 815, over and out.